So tonight, we'll be looking at 1 Kings 18, specifically verses 20 through 40. And 2-3 weeks ago, Eddie came to me and asked me to speak at Brotherhood last week, and couldn't really say no, so I looked through a bunch of devotions to see what caught my interest, and Elijah facing the cultists of Baal was something that I've heard growing up, but never really got a chance to look into. So I did the devotion then, and I realized after doing it, there's a lot more here that I was excited to kind of look into that led me to the speaking tonight. And so, actually, before I get started in reading from God's Word, there's a bit of context that sets up what is going on here. So, the first big thing is Israel is currently under the rule of King Ahab, who has been notoriously a failure as a ruler for Israel. And one of the many things that set up that issue is his wife, Jezebel. She came in not really caring about God or Israel and wanted to instill her own beliefs, her own gods, these pagan gods, and the major one of those would be Baal. So she came in, said no to the worship of Yahweh, and because she is queen and Ahab didn't want to argue against her, followed through and ended up worshiping Baal with her. And now because Israel had turned away from God, he had to punish them. And so 3 years before this story, there is a drought that Elijah told Ahab would be coming. And so at this point, there is a drought, and the people of Israel are suffering. And so we pick up the story where Elijah confronts these cultists. So to set up the drought, Elijah came to Ahab and said, as the Lord thy God of Israel lives, and before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years, except by my word. And as we'll see later, Ahab took that a little bit differently. So, to get into understanding why defeating these cultists is a big deal at this time, we have to understand kind of who Baal was. Or not was, what they believed he was, because as we know, does not exist. And so Baal wasn't just worshipped by the Israelites at this time. He was worshipped by the Canaanites and the Phoenicians, which were very prominent civilizations at this time in history. So because he was one of the major deities at this time, his worship was widespread. So we can tend to realize this now, but in artistic and archaeological descriptions, he is very often depicted as a bull and ram, no bull more, and very often associated with fertility. And apparently to Canaanite lore, this was something that I found interesting. He defeated his father El and became associated with sun and thunder. Remember that, because it's important for what Elijah does. And so we pick up with Elijah coming back. And now before we pick up here, we introduce to a character named Obadiah. And so Obadiah was a God-fearing man at this time, which was a dangerous aspect in that his king and queen, because Obadiah was a wealthy man, or man of means in the court of Israel at this time. And so we meet Obadiah. And Obadiah meets Elijah on the road. Now at this point, Elijah had been told to go to seek Ahab, and he met Obadiah. And so a very important part to know about Obadiah is he was sheltering a lot of prophets. And the Bible records it as 100 hidden in caves by 50. And the reason he was hiding him was Jezebel was actively trying to get the prophets of God killed. She didn't just push the worship of God away. She actively tried to diminish it out of Israel. And so that raises the stakes for what Elijah is about to do and what Elijah will face after this story. And so right before we get here to the prophets of Baal, starting in chapter 18, we get Elijah confronting Ahab. And so the Lord said, "Go show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth." So Elijah went and showed himself to Ahab. And now I'll get back to where we actually get the confrontation. So starting in verse 17, we get, when Ahab saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, "Is that you troubler of Israel?" And so the reason I bring this up, stop here, is the line, "O trouble of Israel," is important because Ahab fully believes Elijah is the cause of this drought. Because to Ahab, he believes in Baal at this point. And so he believes Baal has cursed Israel because they have this prophet out here who caused the drought. So Ahab believes Elijah's at fault. And so he calls him the troubler of Israel. Elijah correctly responds, "I have not troubled Israel, but you have, and your father's house, because you have abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals." And this is where we get to the setup of what happens. Now therefore, send and gather all of Israel to meet me at Mount Carmel, and the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. And so, I keep on saying this a lot. That last line is important. Who eats at Jezebel's table? That's showcasing that these are state-funded prophets. These aren't just prophets who came in and are worshiping whatever. Jezebel brought these 850 prophets in to push away God and bring up her own gods. And so this all comes up because if you just read verses 20 through 40, you get this really epic confrontation of Mount Carmel. But the stakes here are a lot more than I realized when I first started looking into this. It is literally a prophet of God who is of his people being hunted by the state and killed for their worship against the state-funded prophets who are backed by the king and queen. So as we keep these stakes in mind, that they are basically dueling it out for the fate of Israel to end this drought. And so, when I first started envisioning this, and some of the commentaries I read, a lot of it was like the old Wild West, two gunslingers at high noon facing off in the middle of the street. But that says that there's a chance for either one to win. For me, this is much more, you're at work and you see that coworker you don't like, you've been working at a job all day, nothing's working, he says, "I'm going to try this idea." You know that idea is not going to work, but you just sit back and let him try it on his own, waiting for him to fail. So starting in verse 20, so Ahab sent all the prophets of Israel and gathered all the prophets together at Mount Carmel. And Elijah came near to the people and said, "How long will you go limping between two different opinions?" I'm going to stop there for a second and let you look over this verse. How can you falter between two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if it's Baal, follow him. Which is a fair argument. Either you're going to follow one God, who is Lord above all, and we know has blessed this nation, or you're going to follow this one kind of God who the queen brought in, who we didn't worship until she got here. And it's a very fair point as well. It's like you can't have two masters of a single mountain. And so I want you to guys think about this in today's world, we may not be worshiping Baal. Baal's long gone. Well, what other gods are we putting in front of God? We say we follow Christ, and I don't doubt any of us do, but what other things are we putting on his level? It does say, "Have no other gods before me," but there's also an inclination of, "Don't have any other gods beside me." You can't worship two things at once. And that's not just, and that could be anything. I remember I was in love with this TV show. I watched it to death. Then I got an urge to be like, I don't need to be watching this. So I prayed on it. And God wasn't telling me the show was bad. He wasn't telling me don't watch the show. What I was doing was I was putting that show on the same level as going to church. I was putting that show on the same level as worshiping God. So these things may not be bad. They may actually be enjoyable. But if you put them on the same level as God, or even above God, that's when things will get troublesome for you. Amen. So now we'll continue along. Two different opinions. If the Lord is God, follow him. But if it's Baal, then follow him. And the people did not answer him a word. They didn't have any answer to that. Then Elijah said to the people, even I, only a prophet left of the Lord, but Baal's prophets are 450 men. Setting the stakes even more of, it's 1 versus 450. Now, if you're any into sports, the team with the most members usually wins. But you got to look at who's the coach. And so we get to the competition. The competition that will dictate who's going to end the drought. And so Elijah sets the rules. and he puts the rules in favor of the Baalists. Get a bull, get 2 bulls, and I'll let you guys choose who gets what. So he gives them the opportunity to get the best bull for them and the worst bull for Elijah. He doesn't argue, he doesn't say make it fair, he says get 2 bulls, you choose who gets what. And so we have the terms of the game. Now let's see what the winning conditions are. The God who answers by fire is God. So I ask you to remember what Baal was often depicted the god of, sun and lightning. If we were looking on even terms, the god of fire and lightning versus the god of all, if they were even, Baal would have a good chance because he is fire and lightning fire from the sky. So even then, playing by the Baalist rules as Elijah is doing, he's putting the ball in their court. No pun intended. And so we continue with that in that when we see this a lot in the Bible, when God challenges other beliefs at the time, he always gives them the advantages. I won't say always because there's probably some other cases that I may miss, but looking at this, God will give them the best chance because we know he knows he's right. So why not make it even more amazing in that they had every chance to get it right, but God is the one who finishes it correctly. So we have the rules, we have the victory. We continue on. It's let 2 bulls be given to us, 1 bull for themselves, cut it in pieces, lay it in wood, but put no fire to it, and I will prepare the other bull, lay it on the wood, and put no fire to it. And you call upon the name of your God, and I will call upon the name of the Lord. Now, this isn't a point, but this is something I love. Notice as he says, call upon the name of your God, but I will call upon the name of the Lord. He doesn't say my God. He correctly identifies Lord as what he is. And the God who answers by fire, he is God. And the people answered, it is well spoken. Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose for yourselves 1 bull, prepare it first, for you are many, and call upon the name of your God, and put no fire to it. And they took the bull that was given to them, and they prepared it and called it upon the name from the Baal from morning until noon, saying, O Baal, answer us. But there was no voice, and no one answered. They limped around the altar that they had made, and at noon Elijah mocked them, saying, cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is musing, or he is relieving himself, or he is on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep and must be awakened. I'm going to stop here as well, because I want you to look at those taunts. They're not just demeaning taunts, like, oh, your God's worthless, my God's better. They're very humanizing taunts. He says, cry aloud, for if he is a God, he either is musing, he's off doing something else, or he's relieving himself, he's on the toilet, or he's on a journey, he's far away, he's not going to be a part of you guys. Or perhaps he is asleep and must be awakened. Now, these are funny, and I will laugh at them all day because it sounds like something I would joke to my friend who is not getting the job done correctly while I sit back and laughing, which is what I imagine Elijah is doing. I can just see him on a log watching the Baalists amuse, knowing that whatever they're doing will not work. But back to these taunts. These are not godly actions. These are not the actions of what a god would be doing. These are actions of what a human would be doing. If I don't answer my phone, I may have left it in the other room, or I may be asleep. I may be on the bathroom. Who knows? It's the same taunts that Elijah is telling these Baalists. If he is Lord, why is he doing this stuff? If he is a God who can call fire from the skies, is he really using the bathroom? I find that taunt the funniest, and I apologize that I keep repeating it. And so as we continue on, we see that there was no answer, there was no voice, and they leaped about the altar with the they had made. And so I was looking at some commentaries, which is where I love looking at what other people say about this. We have the term limp, and it was also used earlier referring to you cannot limp between 2 gods. It doesn't necessarily mean limp as if you had a problem with your leg. It could be dancing, it could be other actions. So it's going back to you cannot limp between 2 gods. You cannot dance the line. You cannot toe tip. You have to be on one side or the other. And here, it's not them limping around. It's them putting on a show. They are trying to get the attention of Baal. It's not them limping around a circle. They are being festive. They're being exuberant, trying to showcase their faith. And so you keep that in mind, in that they're putting their all into trying to get ball. And so they cried about, continuing in verse 28, and they cried about and cut themselves after their customs with swords and lances, until the blood gushed upon them. As midnight passed, they raved on until the time of offering of the oblation. But there was no voice, no one answered, no one paid attention. So during this, I would imagine 4 to 6 hour show, for lack of a better term, they went from dancing around, limping, to getting more extreme, to cutting themselves, to maiming themselves, to bleeding on this altar to get Baal's attention. And so it's showcasing the difference in the power of God and the non-existent power of Baal, that they are putting everything, even their literal blood, sweat, and tears, into this show. And now we get to the fun part. In verse 30, Elijah said to the people, "Come near me." The people came near to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. At this time, there were probably altars of the Lord all around Israel, but because Jezebel and Ahab were in charge, a lot of them had probably been destroyed or taken down. So coming here, Elijah repaired the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. Then Elijah took 12 stones, according to the number of the tribes of the son of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord came, saying, "Israel shall be your name." And with these stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. And he made a trench about the altar as great as would contain 2 seahs of seed. And so my Bible tells me that a seah was about 7 quarts or 7.3 liters. And so I want to take a minute and talk about the significance of the 12 stones. As we know, 12 is a very important number in the Bible because it's the 12 tribes of Israel. So honoring that in this shrine for God, I took 12 stones and put them in an order around. So as we continue on looking at the seahs, he put the wood in the order and cut the bull into pieces and laid it on the wood. And he said, "Fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood." And he said, "Do it a second time." And they did. And they said, "Do it a third time." And they did. And the water ran around the altar and filled the trench also with water. So 3 is also a very important number in the Bible. We have the Trinity and 3 days for Jesus coming back from resurrection. So here Elijah is honoring 3. It's a very holy number for this time. But also let's take a minute and actually see what he is actually doing. He is dousing this wood. So it said 4 seahs, which would be about 28 quarts of water 3 times. He is dousing this wood with water. There is no humanly way to light that wood on fire immediately after dousing it with water. So he is even putting more challenges on the task God is going to do. But he is not challenging God because God has told him to do this. And so we're seeing the extent that he is doing to showcase God's power by making this an extremely difficult task for any man to do. But that's the point, that no man is doing this. And so, at verse 36, in the time of the offering and the oblation, Elijah the prophet came near and said, "O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known to this day that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, that I have done all these things to your word. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know you, O Lord, our God, and that they may have turned their hearts back." I love this prayer, because he does what we see very often in Paul and Peter's letters, in that he is putting himself as a servant to the Lord, and that he is doing this on God's orders. We see that in this prayer, but we also see the point of this whole thing. Owning the Baals are fun. Showcasing that they are wrong is fun, but it's not the point. The point is to turn their hearts back to you again. While Elijah may have fun watching the Baalists run around cutting themselves, knowing that they are not going to get the job done no matter what, that is not the point. The point of this whole trial is to get the Israelites back to following God.
Amen.
Because at this time, and this is very similar to what we see the disciples go after later on. The state is literally hunting down Jews that follow God. Any God-fearing man, any prophet is being hunted down. Obadiah is literally hiding away prophets so they will not get killed. And yet we we have the bravery of one man on the orders of God telling these people to come back to God because these guys are wrong. And we see that in his prayer, that the whole point of this is for God to turn their hearts back to him. So we have this amazing prayer. What happens? Then the fire of the Lord fell, consumed the burnt offerings of the wood and the stones of the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces, said, "The Lord, he is God, the Lord is God." Amen. And so, I keep on saying that a lot. We have the outcome. We've had Elijah mocking the Baals as they deserve. We've had Elijah building this offering up with the 12 stones, dousing the wood in fire, in water, fire comes later, 3 times with 24 quarts each. And so the Lord sends down fire, which the Baal believes is their domain. And I think that's something that context really showcases here. It's not just that God did it, which is amazing in of itself. He took what the Baalists believed would happen and did it himself. And so we see God doing the works in his way to showcase he is Lord over all, even to the ideas that the other people believe, using what they believe against him. And notice, it doesn't just say the wood and the bulls was burnt up. It says that the wood, the stones, and the dust. You know how hard it is to burn dust? The dust was gone. And the water and the stones and the water that was in the trench. And so we have the outcome. The Baalists have lost, because we knew they would happen, but they didn't. And so, as I said, I love this because this isn't just looking at it faith. This is history. The worship of Baal, we know happened, which to me only solidifies the Bible as history more. But we knew not Baal existed, but the worship and the cult of Baal did at one point. We have artifacts, we have historical evidence. And so we saw God showcasing his one overall. And here's to finish this off, we got to look at what happens to the Baals, the Baalist cultists. And while this isn't so happy as it has been, it's important to know what happens when you go against the Lord. And so Elijah said to them, "Seize the prophets of Baal, let no one of them escape." And they seized them. And Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slaughtered them there. That is dark. But as we know, God is not one to shy away from killing those who need to be killed. That's why the commandment isn't thou shalt not kill, it is thou shalt not murder. There is a time when killing is necessary. And as depressing and dark as this was a time when killing was necessary. These were Baalists. These were pagan worshipers who weren't even just worshiping away from the people of God. They were active in hunting down prophets. So it wasn't just like some far-shoot cult that did nothing with the Israelites and nothing with the Jews. They were actively hurting God's people physically and spiritually by turning them away from God. So, and this is an argument that's for a long time was hard for me to argue, is why does God kill people? And this was something I had to look at back in when Saul had to kill the kingdom. If God says someone needs to die, all that has been done for them has already been done, and they said no. If someone in the Bible dies by God's command, that is the last thing on the list. Right. Everything else has been tried. Right. And so it's important to know that God does, and it kind of gives me hope for today. And that God isn't calling for deaths of the nations. It means that there's still hope for this world. We are not at the bottom of the list. There are still things we can do. So looking back at the Old Testament, especially when you see these situations where God has had people die because there's no hope for them, and look at today, we still have hope. I know we look around the world and there's war and financial situations, all this bad, but as I said, we are not at the bottom of the list. There are still things we can do. There are still things organizations can do. And so that gives me hope looking at this. And so we have the death of these ballists. And we have the outcome. Remember, this was all because there was a drought that Elijah had proclaimed God would deliver. And Elijah came to Ahab and saying, we will end this drought, but this needs to be done first. And now that has been done. God has come out supreme. The drought comes to an end. And Elijah said to Ahab, go up, eat and drink, for there is a sound of the rushing of rain. And Ahab went to eat and drink, and Elijah went up to the top of Mount Carmel and bowed himself down on the earth and put his face between the knees. And he said to the servant, go again 7 times. Go look in the east. And he went up and looked and said, there is nothing. And he said, go again 7 times. And the 7th time he said, behold, a little cloud like a man's hand is rising from the sea. He said, go up to Ahab, prepare your chariot and go down, lest the rain stop you. In a little while the heavens grew black, and the clouds and the winds, so there was a great rain. And Ahab wrote and went to Jezebel, and the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he gathered up his garments and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. So we have the beginning, middle, and end. The beginning, if you want to go far back, Ahab brings in Jezebel, who introduces these prophets who are going against God. And not only are they going against God, they're hunting down the prophets of God. God tells Elijah to go tell Ahab there's going to be a drought, and there is. Ahab blames Elijah because he saw Elijah as saying, I will bring the drought, not that God will bring the drought. So Ahab blames Elijah. Elijah comes through and says, hey, there's an easy way to solve this. You bring the prophets of Baal, and I'll bring my faith to God, and God will deliver rain after we do this challenge. And so that's the middle. That's the glorious part of God showcasing his power. And while that is amazing and it's fun to look at and see in the challenge, the deeper meanings of what's going on are important to look at. The point of it, trying to showcase God wants the people of Israel to turn their heart back to him. When I looked at it the first time, I easily missed that, because you get this masculine display of faith in God against the masses, which is very important. Let's not forget, it was one man versus 450. And I made the comment, you got to look at who the coach is. You may have the best players in the world, but if they have no organization, they're going to lose against a team with a great organization and coaching. So you have these 450 players who had no idea what they were doing. In fact, they made up their own rules. There was no coach guiding them how to play. And yet we had Elijah with the greatest coach ever, the greatest leader ever, telling him exactly what to do. And Elijah did it, and the Lord delivered. Amen. And as I said, it's very important that we get to you have turned their hearts back to you again. And so I kind of skipped these slides. We have the people declaring out, the Lord, he is God, the Lord is God. Mission accomplished. Thank you.